So welcome to another episode of IhsanCast with the Triple H in the house. My host here is Hassan Malik. We have here Hassan Khan, the founder member of the IhsanCast. You're the founding guy, are you?
Well, I think it's a collective.
Oh, what was it, collective?
Yeah.
Okay, and then over here in the corner, weighing about 180 pounds, undisputed world champion, the king of Glasgow, Hassan Sharif. MashaAllah, he's a good friend and very knowledgeable. Anyway, we've got an exciting episode.
What an intro? How are you going to talk that?
I can't top it. We're going to talk about preservation of the Quran.
Just before we start, can I just say, please check out our previous posts on Facebook. We've got a page up, just give us a like, and always remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. But
Yeah,
Hassan Malik,
please subscribe and pass it on to fellow Muslims and also to your non-Muslims. Especially this topic here. This topic is so important. Why is it important?
preservation of the Quran.
Yeah, but why is it important?
Well, I mean, it's essential, it's the crux of the religion. That's where we get all our knowledge from, that's where we get everything from. So, how was it preserved?
Exactly.
How do we know it's not been changed?
Well, this topic is so important because me personally, I watch a lot of like these atheist debates, right? And what they always do is they try and attack the source. This is why I think this topic is so important. And you know, for Muslims, they should pass this along to other Muslims, especially to people who have doubts, because there's a lot of doubts about this topic. But this topic, it's so important. So the topic is about preservation of the Quran. So we know that the archangel transmitted knowledge to the Prophet ﷺ, who then transmitted it to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So the culture at that time was a very kind of it was a very oral kind of culture, wasn't it? So I was wondering if Hassan, if you can explain the two methods from which the Quran has been preserved.
Yeah, so you have the first one, which is arguably one of the main ones, which is the oral preservation of the Quran. Then you have the second, which is the written preservation of the Quran. Both are done at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. One is the oral method, which is basically memorizing the verses and relaying them back to the Prophet ﷺ, who corrects any mistakes. And basically you continue from there until you've completed the memorization of the Quran. The second one is an actual written preservation of the Quran. What we mean by written preservation of the Quran is that the verses that have been written all have to be written at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in front of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's what we mean by the written. The oral is the actual just oral transmission and the oral recollection. The written is the actual writing, which has to be done, overseen by the Prophet ﷺ at the time.
Right.
So if you're saying it's an oral culture at that time, and it's an oral transmission, how do you know there was no mistakes with the oral? Because it could be quite easy to make even a slight grammatical error or an error in accent or in that if that gets transmitted.
Yeah, so the first things first is the Arabs come from an oral culture. So what we mean by the oral kind of culture is the fact that everything they would do would be based upon not reading, the opposite, basically speaking. It's a dialectal culture, which means that if I'm speaking to you, you're speaking to me, there is no written, there's not really, written isn't the style that they would use. So with that, when we're talking about the oral preservation, the first things first is you've got to understand who were preserving the Quran, who were preserving the words of God, are the companions. And we only take from the companions the words that are written of the Quran. We only take the companions' words. So first things first is, okay, are the companions upright? Do they understand their duty to preserve the Quran? Yes, because God has chosen them and has said in the Quran that you are the best generation to be sent forth by mankind. Second of all, you've got to understand the motivation that the Prophet ﷺ gives to them. like one of the frequent hadith which are mentioned time and time again to encourage people to learn and read the Qur'an and teach the Qur'an is the best of you are those who learn the Qur'an and teach it. You see, the Prophet ﷺ is not just talking to the future people like me and you. He is giving that advice and that motivation to the companions that the best of you are the people who memorize and learn the Qur'an and then pass it on. So that motivation that then the companions are given it's very serious. It's a serious duty that's been given to them. God has blessed them from being the first generation of Muslims who were with the Prophet ﷺ, and they've got a duty to ensure that the religion carries on, number one. Second of all, the Prophet ﷺ was giving them motivation to preserve and to read as much of the Qur'an as possible.
Right.
So that's why then the oral preservation, in terms of what the motivation behind it, is so strong. Now we go on to can they make mistakes, etc., etc. The thing is, the culture is such a strong culture of learning, and you've got to understand this idea of mutawatir. Mutawatir is multiply transmitted, mass transmitted, so that even if there is a mistake, it's transmitted to so many people that if there is a mistake, even a slight error, because so many people have heard it, even a slight error could be picked up very, very easily. So that ensures that even slight errors can be clarified and corrected.
So you mean when the Prophet was transmitting it to everyone else, there were so many people there that there could not be a mistake with it?
Yeah, so if so many people there, if you then said the Prophet ﷺ said that this is a verse of the Qur'an, and you recited the verse of the Qur'an, if you recited it even slightly wrong, for instance, there would be like literally 100 people saying no, he's wrong, and this is the correct way. Now every single one of those people acting as a guard, as a protector of the verses. And like I said, understanding and having that mentality of what? Having that mentality of understanding that this is their duty, this is one of their prime duties as being Muslims at the time of the Prophet.
I think that's what a lot of people miss, is that the responsibility that people had to the Quran, and people often forget that when they're trying to doubt it. They don't realise that why would they want to change it if it's the words of God?
Yeah.
You know, when they wouldn't want to change it, so that responsibility is...
And you said that the Quranic text is mutawatir. Can you explain more about what this term means?
Yeah, so the idea is multiply transmitted. So mutawatir is multiply transmitted, means that there's so many people that heard these verses at the time of the Prophet ﷺ clearly and effectively, and were Muslim at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that it cannot be fabricated or it cannot be a lie. Because, for instance, if I give a speech in front of 100 people, and then someone else has said, oh, you said this, those 100 people act as a defense to say, actually, no, you didn't. So they're all like witness bearers. Yeah, like a court of law, for instance. They're all witness bearers saying, no, this is actually what was said. So mutawatir is so strong because of that. Because you cannot doubt, if you're then going to accuse 100 people or 200 people who have said exactly the same thing, then this case is so strong that in order for you to refute it, you're going to have to bring something stronger.
It's actually more stringent than a lot of like historical claims, generally, isn't it? So I was just trying to find out how do you then, because you said that when the actual recitation of the Quran was actually preserved because you had like a mutawatir transmission. How do you then explain the different recitation? Because apparently there's 7 or 10 types.
Yeah. So the different recitations are different ways. So the 7 qira'at of the Quran, 7 variant readings of the Quran. What you've got to remember is that Islam came at a time where it's aimed to spread. So the Prophet ﷺ, what he's doing is, naturally, if you're trying to pass a message on, for instance, if you're passing a message on to someone in America, you're going to use a slightly different dialect, you're going to speak in a different tone. If you're going to speak to even a person across the street who speaks in not maybe a high technical English as you are, okay, you're gonna explain it in that way. But that's not what happened with the high technical speech in terms of you lower the tone of the speech of the Quran. What you actually do is you recite it in their dialect, which means that the meanings, the words, everything are exactly the same and are preserved in exactly the same way. However, instead of saying, for instance, like you've got aluminium and aluminum, they both mean the exact same thing.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah, tomato, tomato. Everyone knows what these things mean, however, just the dialect is different. Meaning is exactly the same, the meaning is being preserved in the exact same way. There's no difference in that. The only thing that's changed is the dialect and how you say it.
So you're trying to say the Quran's very adaptable then?
No. What I'm saying is that the Quran, when it was, to answer this question directly, when the Quran was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, he passed it on in the easiest way possible to those tribes.
Yeah.
So that meant that he read the Quran in their dialect so they could understand it. When they understood the message, they could see this message is not the Prophet ﷺ speaking, because this isn't a message that could be made from creation. Rather, this is a message that could be given from the Creator.
Right.
That was the aim in the dialect, to show that. When that was shown, the message was passed on, they converted to Islam. And then they carried that on. So that is a means of preservation as well, because it means that, look, for instance, if it was only in the Qurayshi dialect at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, if the Qurayshi dialect, if that one dialect faded out, for example, would that mean that the Quran would just fade out? No. So it's actually a remarkable thing, because it adds to the preservation, because you have 7 different variant readings, which are all mutawatir, which are all correct. We don't have any dispute over them. But the fact that you have 7 of them actually, in fact, adds to the preservation rather than weakening the preservation.
Right. Okay. So people have asked me, because how come like the Quran was like, because we know like it took 23 years before the whole Quran was revealed. So how come it wasn't revealed in one go? Why was it spread over 23 years?
So the answer to that would be very simple. Let me give you an example. If I was to bring you a new religion right now, okay, and I was to say to you, these are all the commands and prohibitions that you have to do right now, would it be acceptable? So if I was to say to you, you're not allowed to do this, 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 would that motivate you to accept the religion?
No, you'd reject it.
No, because you would think,
too much.
this is too much all at one time.
Yeah.
Now, for something that's so big in a person's life, such as change, remember, you're not just changing the religion, you're changing the whole culture of the Arabs at the time.
Yeah.
Now, culture can only be changed over time. It can't be a sharp culture change.
Yeah.
Very proud culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you go in there and you say, shame on you for burying your daughters, shame on you for drinking, stop gambling, stop taking
I
usury.
think the drinking was actually a good example, because Aisha radiallahu said that if the first verse said alcohol was banned, no one would become Muslim.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So I can see the wisdom of why.
So that's a common sense, practical approach to it. The second approach is what? Is it's revealed over 23 years due to the fact of the people that it's being revealed to. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in certain verses is praising the Prophet ﷺ and is rebuking the Quraysh for certain actions they have done against the Prophet ﷺ at the time. Okay? And then the second point is what? The second point is that it's giving solace to the Prophet ﷺ and to the companions. So when their boycotts are occurring against them, when they are getting beaten and abused by the Quraysh, when they're getting thrown out of their homes and their lands, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them a message or in the form of the Quran, to hold on to their steadfastness.
Right.
So that's a very practical example of why it would happen. And the same thing with us is that if we are, so it's not diluted. This is the point. There's nothing like, oh, why was it all not given at once? Why did it have to be diluted? It was diluted because of these reasons.
Yeah.
Second example that I want to give, the second issue with this is that, you know, this whole topic of preservation of the Qur'an, have you ever thought about it like this? If something was revealed all at once, how difficult would it be for people to memorize it all?
I was just thinking that as well.
How difficult would it be for people to... So if I give you a 900-page book right now,
Yeah.
and I said, you've got to memorize all of this right now,
Yeah.
you think, oh...
Also,
This is
how could you
difficult.
follow all the commands in one
Exactly.
go?
Yeah.
Exactly.
In fact, it was actually the
Yeah.
custom of the Sahabas to
Exactly.
learn 5 verses or
Yeah.
maybe 10 verses and implement them
Yeah.
Yeah.
in their life before.
So this is
Proceed to the
exactly what Sayyidina Umar did.
Mm.
So practically, it actually adds to the preservation
Yeah.
that the way it was revealed in such a way which it aided the companions to memorize it and preserve it.
Yeah.
So again, it actually goes against that argument that people would
Yeah.
bring.
Yeah. Well, there's this other like arguments that you know atheists like to fling around,
Mhm.
that a lot of the stories and myths in the Quran, they were borrowed from other places, because they say that Prophet ﷺ, when he was young, he travelled up to
Mhm.
Sham,
Mhm.
and so he may have borrowed or collected
Mhm.
stories of, you know, from the
Yeah.
Christians, from other stories. How would you respond to that?
The response to that would be that, look, we're not denying that these are Abrahamic faiths. We're not
Yeah.
denying that the Abrahamic faiths are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. We're not
Right.
denying those prophets that the Bible mentions, that the Torah mentions. We say that they are prophets of ours.
Yeah, and the Quran actually says
Yeah.
that they,
Yeah.
to confirm
Yeah.
previous scriptures.
So the previous scriptures are confirmed. Therefore, that's not really a disanalogy to make. If the Prophet ﷺ is creating an analogy and saying this is like the time of Musa alayhi salam, etc., or this is like the time of you know, his great grandfather Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Yeah.
If he's saying that, that's a perfectly logical and reasonable analogy to make. Why?
Yeah.
Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said himself that those religions came from him as well.
Yeah. But then they'll say, what about some of the words in the Quran?
Mhm.
They're like foreign words.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
where do they come from?
Yeah. So those foreign words that they want to use, foreign words, remember one thing, the foreign words that were used in the Quran were actually the people before Islam came interacting with different cultures. So what you just mentioned about people, you know, travelers going to Sham, travelers going to Egypt or wherever they were going to, for instance, yeah, they bring back colloquial or sayings from there which they use, because religion is something which always adds every time. So we have this this phrase Uber, yeah, and everyone knows what Uber means nowadays, and it's, you know, we have Uber cars, taxis,
Yeah.
etc. It's
Yeah.
obviously a German word, but we know what that means, and that's now slowly it'll be ingrained into our culture. And if people say, "Oh, that's uber interesting," people think, "Oh, that's very interesting." They'll understand it. The same way that these things were actually then put part into the Arabic language over before Islam and before the Quran was revealed. So when the Quran was revealed, these words were not actually foreign. They were used
At
in
that
the
time.
lexicon and the language at the time of the Arabs and who it was being revealed to.
Probably
So they're not foreign words.
Right.
Do you understand?
Right.
They're not foreign words for the Quraysh at the time.
Okay.
So that also showing progression from the previous
Yeah.
religion then as well. What about the Quran in terms of you were mentioning stories? What is the value in having stories as well as guidance, as well as law in the Quran, as well as, you know, the Quran's been split into 3 different parts: stories, law,
Yeah.
and I've forgotten the third one. What's the third one?
Stories, long commands and
Commands.
punishments.
Yeah. So what is the purpose of having stories
Mhm.
and commands and laws? Does that add to the preservation in any way?
So stories, I mean, to be honest with you, Jordan Peterson has like
I was just thinking we're entering Jordan
yeah,
Peterson.
Professor Jordan Peterson does real justice to that when he talks about the ideas of the Bible having these myths and stories within it. The reality is that those stories have universal truths within them. So they are things which are timeless.
Yeah. They have
Yeah.
like archetypes
Yeah.
of what a good person have,
Yeah.
archetypes of what the bad person. You have the Musa alayhi salam,
Yeah.
and then you have the
Yeah.
archetype of tyrant, which is Pharaoh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a great way of showing the lessons and just showing the type of archetypes and
Yeah.
kind of the traits
Yeah.
that a person have. And so when you see something in this world, you can sort of identify. Like
Yeah.
so we're living in a world like where there's a lot of tyrants, and we can see that they have the traits of Pharaoh.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
makes it relatable to
So
every generation
examples,
then,
exactly. The point he's
Yeah.
making is that this idea of how do you know if something's good or something's
stands the
evil
test of time.
stands the test of time, and
Yeah.
also using an example.
Yeah.
Like if someone was to say to you, "Who's good?"
It's also the best way to learn.
Exactly.
That's how you learn, teach.
Who's good? You would say Malcolm X is good.
Yeah.
Like you are basically using a
Giving
synonym.
prototype for
Yeah, you're
his,
using a synonym or an example
Yeah.
to show if something is good or not. Which
Yeah.
in logic is
Yeah.
is the way things are done.
So I've got this interesting quote from William Muir, who's an Orientalist. He's written a book called The Life of Muhammad,
Okay.
and he's what he's tried to do is try to kind of pinpoint flaws in the oral tradition.
William
I-
Muir sounds like a Scottish name.
Must be. And he tries to point flaws in the oral tradition, but he does this through the research of Bukhari. And you say, oh, Bukhari,
Bukhari Gate.
yeah, he spent years and years and he's collected like 600,000, but wait a minute, only 4,000 are authentic.
Yeah.
So he's tried to use that as an analogy to the,
Yeah.
or qiyas to the Quran.
Mhm.
How would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, she's totally wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got, look, Bukhari writes in his title is Al-Jami Al-Muqtasar. Muqtasar means an abridgment or a shortened version. So
Yeah.
he's not saying that I only found 4,000 or is this 4,000 he says? It's actually 6,000, but he's not saying that I only found
William, you got it wrong then.
well, let's just take it as he's
Okay.
just saying 4,000, okay? Let's just take William Muir's 4,000 as his research. Bukhari's not saying that that's all he found. Bukhari's saying that these 4,000 have meanings to it, and these 4,000 are pertinent to the issues that I'm trying to show. So Bukhari in his book, you've got to understand the book of Bukhari is not just a collection of hadith.
Yeah.
This is the issue, is people just assume Bukhari is collecting hadith. One of the reasons is, yes, he's collecting and preserving a hadith. As with any scripture, any writing or whatever,
Yeah.
it's a preservation. You have archives for that to preserve these things. But Bukhari's book is way much more than that. The way he uses his chapter headings, the way he shows his examples of what he believes is the correct fiqh opinion, the way he ties the ahadith to verses of the Qur'an. All of these things show that Bukhari's book wasn't just him preserving the ahadith.
That's interesting because I think for most people, that's how they view Bukhari as really just a collection of like the most sahih hadith. And now we're actually hearing that he's actually
more a
intending
book
for
of
something
fiqh.
more.
It's more a book of fiqh. Remember, look, this is Bukhari's masterpiece work. So if you're a masterful hadith scholar,
Yeah.
okay, you're a master of many other sciences as well on top of that. So the reality is what you're actually showing is you're basically showcasing your talent. For instance, if you do a PhD, okay, your idea of doing a PhD is whether you've done undergrad, whether you've done your masters, whether your PhD is on, you're showcasing all your knowledge, all your expertise in that final piece of work. That's basically what Bukhari is doing. So to say it's just simply a collection of hadith is actually doing injustice to the man himself. So William Muir has got that, he's got the idea of, oh, that's all he found authentic. He's got the total wrong idea of what Sahih Bukhari was to begin with. That's not what Bukhari was intending. He actually says that. That's not what he was, and scholars actually
I think a lot of people.
Yeah. He've actually written that, so there's no way that it's just 4,000 Sahih Hadith and that's all he's found. It's 4,000 narrations. There's many more than that, and
he actually intended that this is not all the Sahih Hadith that I've put in this book.
Yeah, of course. The reason why he says Al-Muqtasar is what? Because he wants it to be short enough that people will still read it.
Yeah.
So if he just puts all the authentic narrations in and makes a book which is 100 volumes long, in reality, who's going to read it?
Yeah.
It makes practical sense that that's not what he was actually intending by creating his book.
Yeah.
So to use that example as an example to show that, oh, the oral transmission is weak, is actually a really bad example, because you've just totally misunderstood what Bukhari's intention was of actually compiling his book. So if you've misunderstood the purpose of the book, you can't really use it as anything against the Qur'an.
And I actually heard this from a scholar that Bukhari, his book, was actually not meant for the public. It's actually meant for other scholars. So that was just an interesting note. And also, I assume that this guy probably doesn't really know the different types of hadith as well. You know, you got the mutawatir, and you got the
mutawatir, Qabr al-Ahad, the different levels of Qabr al-Ahad.
Exactly.
And then you've got, and then after that you've got Sahih within Qabr al-Ahad, Sahih narrations, Hasan narrations, types of different Hasan narrations, Da'if, Mawdu, then you've got Musalsal. I mean, look, we can go all
another topic.
Details.
Okay, so do we have any proofs of the first written piece of the Quran during the Prophet's times?
Yeah, so there's many proofs. If you just go into online, type in the Quran, the preservation of the Quran, you have parchments, many parchments which have all been radiocarbon dated. So radiocarbon dating is what they do is they look at the
You heard about the Birmingham one?
Yeah, so the Birmingham one is an example of that. And there's others. There's others. Well, it's not just Birmingham one. There's others as well. People in their spare time can look that up. It's very easily accessible material. That they can look up. And basically with that is they radiocarbon date it. So what they actually look is the paper that this has been written on, and they date the carbon within it to check how long ago that was. It's actually quite scientific. They can get up to, I think it's around about between 30 to 40 years worth of accuracy to it.
Right.
Now the reasoning why that's such a strong proof is that, remember, written, first of all, you mentioned oral.
So the radiocarbon actually proves around the time of the Prophet.
And the reason why that's so strong is this, is because, like you said at the beginning of it, oral transmission. If oral transmission is the primary method, the secondary method, which you would say, is the written transmission. Now, if it's written transmission, that means that writing pieces, etc., will not be so easily accessible. So whenever they're going to write the Quran, they're going to have to find those pieces of paper or whatever they're going to use, the parchments, etc. Those parchments will be very, very similar time to the time where the Quran was being written down, because it's like printing on demand. So it's not like ours. So we have at home I've got 2,000 sheets of A4 black paper ready, and they might have a date from, as I say, 20 odd years back, or you might have jotters which were 40, 50 years old that you're still using. It wasn't like that. The paper or the writing materials were on demand writing materials. So they would only be created or made
for that purpose
when they were needed. So that's actually a proof that shows that they were actually reviewed, not only with the parchments. If they're dated at the time, that means that whatever was written on the parchments would have been almost identical time as well.
So how can we be so sure that nobody got a sneaky bit of paper in there in the middle of it and just stuck and wrote something themselves and stuck it in? How can we be so sure that that's not the case?
So this is when we're gonna come on to Zayd ibn Thabit's compilation of the Qur'an, which I think you've got a few
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
on.
Just before we do that,
Mhm.
I wanted to, because I've seen this kind of questions where
Yeah.
people try to say, "Oh, wait a minute, can you see the actual text of the Quran looks very different
Mhm.
from the text of the
Mhm.
Quran in our Mus'haf,
Mhm.
which is the book that we read,
Mhm.
and say, oh, wait a minute, the dots are missing, or the,
Mhm.
some of
Yeah.
the grammar."
Yeah, so I mean, the dots being missing. Look, you open up most of the classical books of, any of the classical books.
Yeah.
They don't have any dots in them. They don't have tashkil. Why? Because native Arab readers can read without the dots.
Yeah, they don't
The
need
reason why the
Yeah.
dots, tashkil, in Urdu is called zabar, zer, pesh, fatha,
Yeah,
kasra,
yeah.
dhamma, they were created for basically.
non-Arabs.
They were, yeah. Not only that, but when you're sending out to the masses,
Yeah.
you're gonna make a
Yeah.
standard format.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way we
Yeah.
have standard format, standard typing formats. You go to university, it has to be size 12, has to be in this format, this typeset. Why? Because that's the standardization that everyone's used to. Same method is used. There's no, I mean, that's not really a proof against anything.
Yeah. Okay. So, we looked briefly at the some of the things that happened during the Prophet
Mhm.
times,
Yeah.
but there was two other crucial periods. There was
Mhm.
one Abu Bakr radiallahu
Mhm.
and Uthman. Can you
Yeah.
just briefly?
Yeah, so briefly, Abu Bakr's time was the time where basically there were a lot of false prophets. One was Musaylama, who basically he was a false prophet, and he tried himself to create verses, because the Quran challenges people to, if you can, then basically create verses or create chapters like this.
Yeah.
So he tried to do
So
that.
just to be clear, this is after the Prophet, peace be upon
Yes,
him,
this is
passed
after the
away.
Prophet
Yeah.
passed away, during the reign of Abu Bakr
Yeah.
Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So Abu Bakr, seeing this and seeing how he was actually driving people away, fought against him. So Musaylama failed, by the way. He tried to he tried to create something very similar.
I think
to
the person who
chapters
killed
of the
him
Quran.
was the person who killed Hamza. I can't remember his name is. Do you remember the? Okay, well, he's a famous person who killed Hamza, and then I think he approached Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr said that, "Why don't you try and kill this guy?" And
Mm.
What happened with his failed attempt? Was it?
So so what happened was, then Abu Bakr said, look, we need to wage war against him to basically stop this fitna.
On what grounds did he fail? Was it not? How did the people
So
know
as,
that it was?
as the inimitability, so the verses that he was trying to copy and show the same thing,
yeah,
he was laughed at by his peers.
Right.
Because his peers looked at him and thought, yeah, this, like they were mocking him. Even his own friends were mocking him, saying, "Come on, this is not."
Did he have any sort
Right,
of
at all.
credibility or?
No, none whatsoever. So
Right.
what
So
happened
what was it that people just knew this wasn't?
Yeah, why would
wasn't
they
the
do it?
Quran?
So they knew from the Ijaz, so the
This is the
mu'jiza,
miracles,
the
yeah.
miracle of the Quran, which meant that the rhyming of the Quran,
Mhm.
the way it was recited, the different types of rhyming. For instance, I'll give you an example of Surah Fatiha, which everyone knows, well, probably many non-Muslims know as well. You have in the verses Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. When these verses are recited, they have, obviously, as you're listening to it, you can see the rhyming structure, but the rhyming isn't like normal poetry, because if you're writing a poem
Yeah.
and you're wanting the endings to both sound the same,
Yeah.
sometimes what you have to do is you have to use a word which doesn't exactly fit in with what you're trying to say or what you want to say,
Yeah.
but you have to put it in for it to rhyme. The Quran isn't like that. So if you think, how does it rhyme?
So
Well,
every
look
word
at the
is in its
syllables.
correct place, basically.
Yes. So look at the syllables. Even before that, look at the syllables. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. That's 6 syllables. Maliki Yawmiddin. 6 syllables.
Wow.
Both exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of exactly the same. So when it's being
That's
recited,
actually, yeah.
when it's being recited, it sounds sublime when you listen.
Just to
to it.
say, there's like
Yeah.
loads of miracles. So if somebody
Yeah.
says to you, isn't that just a coincidence?
Yeah. No,
Well,
there's
there's like
many. There's
many,
many like
many
the.
But I don't think you could
Yeah.
sustain that.
That's
Over
what I mean.
6,000
That's
pages,
why it can't be a
that's-
coincidence, because there's so
Yeah.
many.
Yeah.
So what's happened is with that, and again the same thing. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, he's talking about Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about him being the most merciful, the most kind. Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment. That that theme within those verses still continues.
Right.
Do you understand?
Right.
The theme of talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the attributes and the qualities and the honour that God has, and the fact that God is the master of everything,
Yeah.
it continues. We've
Yeah.
not had to stop that theme.
I think it's the seamless changes of tense as well throughout Surah Al-Fatiha has it as well. We're moving
So-
from first person to third
So
person.
it's stunning, it's absolutely stunning. So
Right.
that would be one of the ways. And then he tried to replicate that, couldn't replicate it.
Mhm.
So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq goes to wage war against him. What happens is in that battle, he loses between 500 to 700 reciters of the Qur'an.
Mhm.
So then he sits beside Umar and says, look, we need to preserve this written as well as oral. We've already got it, but what we need to do in terms of preserving it in its written form
Mhm.
is that we need to compile it into one book.
Yeah.
So we've already got it preserved in its written form already, but all we need to do now is compile it into one book.
Yeah. And I know Abu Bakr and I was a bit hesitant about
Yeah,
it.
so Omar was first a bit hesitant, and then when he saw the number of people that had died, he
Yeah.
thought, actually, no, we need to do that, it's a good idea.
What was the cause for the hesitancy? Because it makes sense to do that.
It's
so
just,
why-
it's just that Prophet ﷺ
Mm.
never did this before, and he
Yeah.
was someone who just wanted to follow the Prophet to
Yeah.
the letter, basically. But
Yeah.
he kind of acknowledged the wisdom that Umar was
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to tell him. So and the second part, the Uthman era.
Yeah, so the Uthman era was different. It basically, so the Uthman era used the same Musaf that Abu Bakr had compiled. So it was the exact same one, and what he did was he said, right, okay, what we need to do is to get this out to the mass public, we need to create copies which the mass public can understand, accept, and basically follow.
Right.
So Uthman's period was the period of basically getting the written copies out to the major cities, the major towns of the Muslim world at the time. Kufa, Basra, Madinatul Munawwara, Makkatul Mukarramah, etc. These main areas, Samarkand, etc. These main areas where the Muslims were.
Mm.
Let's give it to them.
Okay. So there's an important figure here, Zayd ibn Thabit. Can you explain why he was really important?
Yeah. So Zayd is one of the people who's memorized the Quran in its entirety at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and has read the full Quran to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ has acknowledged that he is an excellent reciter of the Quran. He's praised him for being an excellent reciter of the Quran. On top of that, he's had a complete recitation of the Quran in its order under the tutelage of the Prophet ﷺ himself. He's young, he's intelligent, so that he's got these attributes of having an excellent memory. Because he's young, naturally you can assume that his memory is going to be better than some of the older companions.
Why was it just him? Was there no other people?
So there were others.
There
There
were
were others that were chosen to assist him. So under Sayyidina Uthman's time, there was a whole committee. Zayd was the leader of that,
Right.
but there was a
Right.
whole other committee. And even when it comes to the writing down the Quran, it wasn't just Zayd. It was Sayyidina Amir Muawiyah, Amr ibn al-As, other companions who wrote down the Quran as well.
Okay, and so what method did Zayd ibn Thabit use?
So Zayd basically created quite actually stringent kind of methodology. It was actually quite a scientific methodology that he used. What he did was any copies of Quran that was being written down, what he did was he said, okay, I want everyone to give to me the written copies that you've got of any parchments or verses of the Quran. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to have, they're all going to be the same. How I'm going to make them the same is that the sheet that it's written on cannot be a copy, so it has to be the exact copy that was written down in front of the Prophet ﷺ himself. First, number one. Second one, people have to have seen you, whoever's bringing it to me, at least two people have to have seen you writing down that verse in front of the Prophet ﷺ, because the Prophet ﷺ would have corrected it if he had made any mistakes.
Right.
So there was a very stringent scientific methodology, so that when he had all the verses, all the verses were in the exact same format. Do you understand? They're all in the same format and they're all of the same level to ensure that they're exactly the same. It's like having
Can I
like
just clarify? This is during Uthman's time.
Abu Bakr's time.
Abu Bakr's time. Okay.
Compiling the Musaf.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
compiling the Musaf.
Right.
So then again, original, same status. For every single verse that's been written down, they have to be the exact same.
So then during Uthman's time, was that just regenerating this
Yeah.
original one?
So
basically?
again, Uthman's time was what? This is why actually Abu Bakr, during Abu Bakr's reign, was probably the most significant period because he preserved it and he ordered it to be preserved in such a way which it allowed for Uthman to get it out to the mass public.
Right. Right.
So Uthman then uses that same Musaf.
So sorry, just before that,
Yeah.
how can we be sure that that's the same Musaf that travelled down? That
Yeah.
went through to Umar, then through to his daughter Hafsa,
Yeah.
that the same one?
Then yeah, same one.
And
exactly
we know
the
because it
same
was
one.
protected. That
So you know it's been totally protected because Umar is, extremely protective of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, so of course he's going to be
so his
extremely
character
protective.
stands up to the
Yeah,
test,
his character stands up to the test of time, but also everyone knew that that was like for instance, it's a massive thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
But
his
at the
idea
time-
in the first
At
place.
the time, yeah, at the time of the companions, you got to understand this is a big deal. So everyone knows
Yeah.
that it's in their house. Everyone knows that that's the number one copy.
So was
there's
there any
no-
attempts made to try and steal
no-
the Quran or anything at this point?
I mean, I don't think there's been, as far as I know, I don't know. To be honest, I've not looked
Yeah,
into
okay.
that. I couldn't.
And see, when he collected all the parchment stuff, did he find maybe any kind of differences? Or
No, so
No.
there was no differences in him. Yeah, so differences when he found the parchments is if he saw that this looks like a copy, this doesn't look like the original parchment, it's a copy, he'd ask the question, is this a copy or is this the original? If it's a copy, don't give it to me,
Right.
put it away. If
Okay.
it's the original, we accept the original.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what they mean by rejecting anything was you would reject copies. Everything had to be the original. So everything's of the same status.
Okay.
So then, sorry, how come it took till Usman's time then to make more copies? Why was it not immediately more
So-
generated?
The reasoning behind Uthman's period of it being basically more copies being created.
And just sorry, how long was the difference between those times?
So it wasn't a very long time. We're
Okay.
probably only
Yeah.
talking about 15 to 20 years at best.
yeah.
So it's not a very long time at all. Remember, you've still got reciters of the Qur'an. And remember, during Sayyidina Umar's time, he promotes the Qur'an massively.
Right, okay.
So Sayyidina Umar's time, which we've missed out, but Sayyidina Umar's time, he has like the hour of the Qur'an, the Sa'a of the Qur'an, where basically after Maghrib, every single Muslim, all you could hear if you walked like down the street, for example, all you could hear coming from the houses would be the recitation of the Qur'an.
Right, okay.
He pushed it in such a strong way of the preservation of the Qur'an.
Okay.
So that'd be the first thing he did. The second thing would be Omar, he would teach the people of Medina and he'd teach people like Muad ibn Jabal, etc. And he'd push them towards encouraging them to read the Quran, and he'd then send other companions, like Sayyidina Abu Darda is a famous example. He moved to Damascus, he had over 1,600 students. Over 1,600 students under his guidance who were all reading, memorizing, learning the Quran. So Omar's time was a time of mass kind. So Omar did it, but he contained and remained on that oral tradition.
Right. So during Uthman's time,
Mhm.
when there was like other Qurans
Yeah.
collected,
Mhm.
was there any difference in?
Yeah, so the dialects, again, that's where the dialects come into it. The
Right.
dialects were different. So what Uthman said is, look, again, we're creating a standardized version. So in order to create a standardized version, we need to use one version.
So
Okay,
just to clarify, the
Mhm.
dialects does have no effect on the meaning of the words.
Yeah, of course, we've already,
Yeah.
we've cleared
Do
you
that.
make them up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've cleared that at the
Yeah.
beginning. Same thing. Just cleared that at the beginning, exactly the same. The same logic we're using here. So what he's done is, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh, he said, okay, let's agree on a dialect to use. The last dialect that was used was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that they heard from the Prophet ﷺ was the Qurayshi dialect. So he said, okay, you know what? We can all agree on this dialect. and we all agree that it's the one that the Prophet ﷺ used, the last one that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, and the way that the Prophet ﷺ revealed it to us was in this dialect. So let's all use this. The committee agreed, led by Zayd ibn Thabit, all agreed, and they began copying the Qur'an from Abu Bakr's Musaf, which had been, again, Zayd ibn Thabit, to remain consistent, is the head under Uthman's time. So he's overseeing everything. Why? Because the master copy is being produced by him again. So standardized, collected, led, all means that it's all exactly the same.
To say information packed. Information packed.
So when he's done that, he's basically then, they've all basically copied from that same manuscript. Okay, that same Musaf. When they've copied from that same Musaf, any errors, not even errors, but any grammar things that may be slightly different through the different dialects, what they've done is they've gone back to that Musaf, said, okay, is that the way it's used? That's the way it's used, it's fine. Is that the dialect, the Qurayshi dialect? Okay, that's fine. So what happened was those copies, all those copies that have been created are now all standardized and all exactly the same. They then get sent out to the different cities. It means it's much easier for people to memorize, much easier for people to transmit, and much easier for people to learn in large circles and large volumes as well.
I have to say, I think